Is Tamara home? Nope. It's just the 3 Home Alone boys in your house. How did we get here? Much like vampires, you invited us in. And we are the pod people, right? That's the name of this show?
I thought we were the Home Alone boys. Oh, yeah. What's up, guys? We're talking about Home Alone 3 again today.
Everybody's favorite Home Alone, the one without Joe Pesci.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm joined, as always, by Ben Sheets.
Knock, knock. It's the Pod People PP Squad.
And Eugene Lundeen.
I'm going to stand in the corner of your house and stare at you for 30 seconds. Ooh, spooky.
And this week, we're here to bring you some Stranger Danger. And we're back with our first full-length episode in a really long fucking time. You thought that you were gonna get just nice, short, condensed, hour-long episodes? Nope, we're back to be on that bullshit for like 2.5 hours. Here we go.
Yeah, boy.
We love our themes and concepts. We like making podcasts longer than any of the movies we watch. It's just fun.
We have to do something to fend off our existential angst. Speaking of existential angst, Ben, I hear you have 2 very depressing news stories for us this week.
There's sure something. There was an untitled Blumhouse movie that premiered at South by Southwest, and it was revealed that untitled movie is actually Unfriended Dark Web.
Thank God.
The unfriended sequel none of us knew we needed.
As people may remember on our Unfriended episode that we all said, man, this needs to have a sequel, and Blumhouse needs to make sequels for all their properties.
So since it's subtitled Dark Web, is the ghost just going to be buying drugs and child
porn? Yeah, I think so. You know what, though? Like, honestly, the Dark Web subtitle is probably just them trying to be clever. Yeah, it probably has nothing to do with the actual dark web. They're just like, oh, you know what's dark? Ghosts. And it's on the web, so dark web.
Here's what they do. They make the ghost hunt child predators online. Like
vigilante ghost justice.
Yeah, like a...
Oh my God.
Like an undead Chris Hansen almost.
Oh my God. All of a sudden, I don't want anything more than I want this movie. I would love a fucking horror movie where the ghost of Chris Hansen captures child predators on the dark web.
Not a ghost like Chris Hansen.
It is the ghost of Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen died in a terrible To Catch a Predator accident, and he continues his righteous Dateline work through the dark web.
What I hope more than anything is they don't try to directly connect the 2 movies, because then I'll just be pissed off.
It better be a different ghost, even if that implies that ghosts just live on the internet.
I just don't want Shitty Pants Ghost Girl.
Oh no, I agree. I agree with that.
It's gonna be a movie about a 30-year-old man from Florida who got a streamer killed because he ordered a SWAT team on them. And now the kid is going to be interfering with his Twitch streams and swatting him. Yeah. We're going to have Twitch chat on the side, and so that's going to provide a lot of awesome, like, real-time replies, and it will be like you're watching a movie through Periscope or something. You're all together.
We should definitely work for Blumhouse. I think we would be really...
Do they allow just walk-ins? I feel like at a certain point they want the ideas to come to them.
Let's send them a hard copy of this episode to Jason Blum himself. Send it on a CD, not even like a flash drive. Here's an idea for a horror movie. Somebody comes along and throws a CD of one of our podcasts taped to a brick through somebody's window, and then when they listen to it, it's so bad that they just die.
But then who threw the brick?
Yeah, exactly. Who threw the brick?
Exactly. That's the begin.
That's what you don't know, and it spreads. You know. All right.
The other story is noted director, auteur, some would say, Uwe Boll.
I think that's appropriate.
He maybe very technically fits the definition of auteur.
To be an auteur, do you have to be good?
I guess not.
All right.
That's a very good point. He is suing Universal.
He's suing Universal.
Yes, he's suing Universal because he came out with a movie called Rampage in the late 2000s, all about a shooter. Really high taste.
Yeah, right.
there.
As tasteful as Uwe Boll can get.
And now, since Universal is putting out a video game adaptation of, as Uwe Boll calls it, fake Rampage, he is seeking action against it.
Because Uwe Boll has the monopoly on video game movies. He's just mad that when he was making Rampage, he didn't think to make an adaptation of the classic video game Rampage starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
I will box every Universal executive.
Universal should sue him because...
I would love to see that. Yes, that would be great.
Because he made a movie called Rampage, and if there's one thing I know about copyright law, is that it is illegal for any movie, song, band, book, any intellectual property to have the same title as something else, especially if it's a very generic one-word title.
Do you remember back in the mid-2000s when, I think it was when Postal came out, Uwe Boll was getting all pissed off at movie critics, and he was saying he would box.
Yeah, I fucking do remember that. Didn't he do like a YouTube video, like calling people out?
Yeah,
like anybody who wanted to come box him could do it? Didn't somebody do it and like kick his ass?
I think so.
No, I think Uwe Boll kicked their asses because, well, it's not like these movie critics are prepared to go up and
I will box the shit out of Uwe Boll, and I will win.
He just seems like such a aggressive, angry man.
He's got that German fortitude.
Yeah.
He's basically the Hitler of movies. He deserves to get beaten up by somebody. He deserves that for fucking making Alone in the Dark.
Yeah, I think he's just sad that whatever train was rolling in the 2000s that allowed Uwe Boll to make films, it's run dry.
Have any of his movies ever been actually successful, though?
Well, I
Have
think
any
it's
of them
one of
like
those
made
things,
money?
Right. I think they probably make their money back, and just like Asylum, he makes low grade, easy films in the hopes that either they
Well, for the longest time, Blockbuster was like Uwe Boll's grift, right? So people would check out movies based on name recognition of video games,
right,
and not realize they were just awful.
And I guess Uwe Boll has a skill for making intriguing cover art. So if you see it at Blockbuster and you don't know anything about it, pick it up and you're like, oh yeah, this might be cool.
Yeah.
And then you take it home and it's terrible because it's Alone in the Dark. Bless his heart, man. He really wants to make good video game movies, but...
he certainly wants to make video game movies.
Well, he wants them to be good. I think he desperately wants them to be good. He's just not a good enough filmmaker to make a good movie.
Eventually, we'll do a Uwe Boll solo episode if we're going to be really punishing.
I'm not watching Alone in the Dark again.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that at all.
I'll watch something of his that I've never seen, but
we'll watch Far Cry the movie.
Okay, yeah. You know, the thing about Uwe Boll is maybe he's actually good at fighting because he's just full of so much rage.
Yeah.
Do you think Rampage is a true story about him?
I think it's a fantasy.
It's autobiographical.
We should move on.
Yes, let's get into our main theme. So this week we are, of course, talking about The Strangers, and we will be beginning with the film that partially inspired the first Strangers film. It is called Them.
Yes.
Ils.
Them. It is a 1954 American black and white science fiction monster movie.
Wait a second.
About giant ants attacking the world.
I mean, that is true.
Which inspired the home invasion film The Strangers just 54 years later. But no, them also is a 2006 French-Romanian horror film about a couple, Clementine and Lucas, who have a vacation home, or maybe not a vacation home, just they have a house off in like the forest away from civilization.
Somewhere in Romania,
Yes.
where you're bound to be attacked by vampires.
As we know, if you find yourself in Eastern Europe, you better hope you're an Eastern European, because you're going to be in a lot of trouble otherwise.
Because if you're French or American or something else, then you are for sure gonna die.
Yeah.
Probably will be hunted for sport.
Yeah, if there's one thing horror movies have taught me, never go to Eastern Europe.
You will get played with and murdered, and you will also run into vagrant children.
When I was like 13, I did go to Poland, and I didn't get murdered, but I did get yelled at by an old gypsy woman in the bathroom of a train station.
Oh, it was probably two children stacked up on top of each other. They're the old people are behaved. It's just the children we got to worry about. But Clementine and Lucas, as they are sleeping one night, they begin to hear noises outside, and they realize someone or some ones, no, that's not, some peoples are harassing them and trying to break into their house and most likely murder them. And so that's the basic premise right there. A simple home invasion film that was apparently shot in just 30 days. It's all one location. It's a giant
short,
house
too.
Yes.
70 minutes.
70 minutes, very short and sweet.
Just like all good horror films, it begins with the opening kill, which I had felt when watching it. Was that something that might have been put on to help extend the runtime? We felt differently on it, and I don't think it's a bad. I mean, a lot of good horror movies begin with the opening kill, like It Follows.
Yeah, you gotta have a setup kill.
Exactly. You need to. It's to show like the what exactly they're dealing with, how powerful, whatever, you know, whether it's a creature or a murderer, what they're capable of.
It didn't feel tacked on to me. I mean, maybe they decided to go back and do that so they could stretch the runtime a little bit.
Because it's incredibly short, which plays to its strengths, because movies like these where it's just in one single location, it has just like one or two characters that we're following. You really want to trim any fat that you have.
My problem with the opening scene wasn't the fact that it was there, but the way it was executed more so. As cheap as it was, the jump scare in it, where like mud is being thrown against the window, actually got me to jump.
Oh yeah,
Which doesn't happen very often. But you know, the whole mom disappearing instantly while she's working.
Oh yeah, when she's trying to fix the car, and she's just the daughter gets out of the car and the mom's just gone.
Yeah,
Right, they do that. I mean, just like a good horror movie killer, they can teleport. So.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like it fits though, because the rest of the movie is trying to go for such a realistic tone. It didn't pass my suspension to disbelief. Was it just me, or did like the lighting seem super off in that scene especially?
In what way?
Like, it just seemed cheap. It seemed like it was shot on like a DV camera.
I mean,
I agree
this
with
whole
that.
movie has I think a pretty lo-fi aesthetic.
Right.
I would be curious to know what it's shot on, because it seems I don't want to say cheap, because cheap makes it sound bad, and I think for a movie like this, the lo-fi aesthetic actually worked pretty well for me. You know, a very straightforward like thriller slasher movie. You know,
Right. And
I thought the look of it was quite nice. Some of it is a little dark. They did seem to have trouble with their outdoor night lighting.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And it's probably just, you know, a limitation of cameras not being able to shoot low light very well. But
Yeah.
I think the car scene at the beginning especially like shows the limitations they had with lighting, because it looked much cheaper than the rest of the movie.
That didn't really bother me too much. I thought the aesthetic of the opening scene worked pretty well. For me, at least. The night lighting sort of started to bother me at other times later in the film. Like once they're out of the house and running through the woods, it was either way too dark or way too bright. I don't know. That opening scene did not bother me very much.
Production of it is not a big issue, and you can tell this seems like they were able to find this house, which just a lot of cool little set pieces you could do while running around in there.
Yeah, I actually really liked the central location, this big old
it's sort of dilapidated.
Kind of dilapidated and run down, but at the same time, it sort of gives you the impression of like an old mansion, just because it's so huge. I think it looks really good. Whoever dressed the set did a great job. It got a little bit weird for me when Clementine is like being chased in the attic, and she runs into the room where there's like all of the sheets of hanging plastic.
Right.
I feel like that's such a cliched sort of set piece. Like, why is there? I don't understand a practical reason to have plastic hanging up in such a layout. Like, it's one thing if it's on the walls or if you're doing like painting and stuff, but to have it hanging down all over the room and make like a maze of plastic, like, it looks cool visually, but that sort of failed to suspend my disbelief.
I actually kind of like that. I mean, it's corny and it's used all the time, but
I mean, the scene was handled competently. That was the first part for me, setting aside the very opening scene. That was the first part for me where it started to drift outside of the realm of realism and more into just sort of like generic horror tropes. And I don't think they did it poorly, but it sort of set up a precedent before that I was just kind of like, oh, they're just doing this.
Well, it's interesting you guys bring up realism, because I hadn't felt that way. What I think it is they spend a decent amount of time showing the relationship between Clementine and Lucas. This couple, they're just happy. They seem to genuinely just like enjoy each other's company.
They're a very average couple, I think.
Right, but
they're just happy, and there's nothing like, there's no special event or anything that their character development is centered around. It's really just like them hanging out at home, like they cook dinner and watch TV.
Was that a positive for you guys?
I think so.
I would say it's a positive, because I think with a home invasion movie, if you don't have any interest or at least some sort of investment in the characters that are getting attacked, then it gets grating. And this is something I'll get into when we talk about The Strangers, but I just felt more involved because these characters felt, for the most part, rational in compared to the things that were happening around them.
They seemed very relatable. They seemed like everyday people, which I do think, I will agree with you. I think that's important in a home invasion style film, where you need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of these characters. So I did appreciate that. Were you saying that hurt? Hurt it for you, Ben?
I kind of disagree with you guys a little bit. I think not having any tension between the characters kind of just made their progression through the movie a little more flat.
That's interesting, because that was the problem for me in the remake. I felt, I don't want to go into it too much, but with their conflict, I felt.
Well, yeah, I would agree. I don't think the remake does it well, effectively. But I think having it there adds an extra level of tension that kind of creates like an undertone throughout the movie.
I will kind of agree with you there when it comes to The Strangers, but I don't want to get too heavily into that yet.
But yeah, the biggest problem I had with this movie, and the reason I am not really a big fan of it, is the pacing of this movie. I think the pacing is not well done at all. This is like a 70-minute movie, right? There is a shot where it just holds on Clementine as she just walks on the outside of the school for literally 36 seconds.
You timed it?
Yeah. Like, I was like, this is weird in such a short movie that they're gonna just hold on this for so long.
I didn't notice that. I mean, I did notice that the opening credit sequence where she's just driving is kind of long.
Yeah. It feels like a lot of this movie is just so padded out with filler. Some of the last bit is effective. Like, the action doesn't really push itself into high gear until the last, like, 25 minutes.
Well, but that's sort of the point of the first kill in a movie as well, that you then take some time to let it simmer and to wait. You already know that the threat is approaching, and so then there's that time to try and build it up.
Yeah,
I guess I hadn't noticed.
The problem for me is it's
of...
just not that tense throughout that
section. I would disagree. I would say that the build up works much better for me than the payoff.
Well, yeah, because the payoff we get for these attackers as well is to me is a pretty disappointing thing.
Yeah, for me too. I mean, I guess we can sort of start talking about that. Like, there's obviously multiple people attacking them. We discover that pretty quickly. An undetermined number of people who are fucking with them. Then it just turns out to be a bunch of sewer children.
Right, yep, just a bunch of European vagrants.
Like teenagers, like young kids and teenagers.
Well, that's revealed in, like, the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it's first revealed when they're running through the woods and Lucas kills one of them, or like hits them with a stick or something.
He might as well. If he beat the fuck out of that.
Yeah,
kid.
I'm pretty sure he killed him, and it's like he rolls him over, and it's like a 12-year-old, and then it's like, what the fuck?
I mean, like, we all got what they were going for, that corrupted youth thing, but it just makes you question everything you saw before. It's like, oh, these are just children?
That's what makes me groan even more about the opening scene.
Is knowing that it's kids.
Yeah, they just, like, captured this mother who was working on the engine, made her disappear, and then had the strength to overpower.
But that's why they can teleport, because they're so small.
Oh, yeah.
I guess you can argue for the element of surprise, but still, like, at a certain point, once Clementine gets, like, captured and taken down into, like, the tunnels underground and stuff, and you see that they're kids.
Right, and it's not like burly 13-year-olds. These are like child.
Yeah, it's like well,
8-9-year-olds.
Some of them are a little older and some of them are younger, but it's just like at that point, I just was no longer afraid.
Yeah.
I at that point I had a hard time
feeling the threat, because you're like, I just want to punch these children in the face.
Yeah. The one slightly older kid is like holding a bag over Clementine's head, and the other little kid is like, stop, you're hurting her. Isn't that the point? Isn't that why they're doing this?
Yeah, that's all.
And also, like, the kid with the bag is like 12, 13. Like, just fucking push him off.
Right.
He probably weighs like 80 pounds. Like,
it's a really disappointing reveal. And what they were trying to go for, just about these messed up kids, like, oh, they don't really get what they're doing. They're just having fun harassing these
like
people.
but I think the build up to that reveal is pretty effective.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Let's go into that a little bit more, because, well, okay, so first half an hour of this movie is them just setting up this relationship, essentially. Right. The last 25 minutes are when it kicks into high gear, so that leaves about 15 minutes of actual build-up. And the actual build-up is mostly just them hearing noises around their house and running around.
I think what's effective about that is you know nothing about who is attacking them. You don't know how many of them there are. You know there's more than one, especially because they start running around the house and like slamming all of the shutters closed, and they cut the power to the house, so they're trying to put them in like total darkness. And I think all of that stuff works for me really well. For the most part, when she's being chased through the attic and she's hiding and you like see the feet of the person like walking around, all that stuff, I mean, it's not particularly creative, but I think it's effectively tense.
Like, I agree that it makes the home invasion seem real, but I don't feel like the villains ever felt imposing. And the payoff certainly doesn't help that either. But the fact that they don't feel like that much of a threat.
I can agree with that. And there's a great scene we were talking about when she's walking upstairs in the attic amongst all those curtains, and we hear this clicker going off, which we find out it's like one of those fucking party clicker things. So it's
at
really
the end,
dumb.
that is really dumb. I will say, I think one of the more creative, effective things is when they're running through the woods and you hear the killers making different sounds, like from different parts of the forest, like they're communicating using like very specialized noises.
Yeah.
I thought that was really a really interesting idea.
They were just carrying around sheet metal.
Yeah, a little party blowers.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously had like whistles and shit, but like that stuff was kind of creepy. But then once you realize that they're kids, and you realize that like the slow clicking that you hear when the guy's like stalking her through the attic is from one of those fucking party spinners.
It's so dumb.
Oh my god, that's so frustrating.
But my point was that when she's walking in the attic and we see one of the attackers behind her, like as he lunges, she immediately turns around and pushes him off
the fucking balcony.
And I remember I turned over to you, Matisse, and I'm like, oh, she's gonna look down, he's gonna disappear. But then we look down and like, no, he's fucking dead.
He's just splatted on the ground. Right. No, I appreciated that too. That seemed very realistic. Like she just Halloween style fucking shoved him off the fucking balcony.
It's just like she did not hesitate for a second. She's just like, no,
fuck this. Yeah, exactly.
Pushes his ass off. But then all the other kids start climbing up, and that's when I start making those dumb connections in my mind. It's just like, just hang out by the edge and kick them as they try and climb up there.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I was like...
This movie answers the question, how many fourth graders can you take in a fight?
Yeah.
Well,
apparently
apparently like one or two max.
Yeah.
Well, because after, as we mentioned, Clementine is captured by one of the kids. She's being tortured with a bag over her head, and Lucas comes down and kills one of them, and the kid that was like, oh, stop, you're hurting her, like they decide to listen to him and like let him show them the way out. I know maybe you're supposed to think like he's one of the nice kids, just like he's just running with a bad crowd. It's not set up.
Why
so
doesn't he just go home?
Right, and so yeah, it just feels like a lie. Exactly, yeah. Like why is he?
Yeah,
even
why
there?
is he hanging out with these kids if they're killing people and he doesn't like it? Why is he associated?
Right, and then
caught up in the wrong crowd.
And then he's showing them the way out. Clementine climbs up first, and then the kid kicks Lucas off the ladder, and he falls down. Leaving him to get eaten.
Yeah, to get dragged off horror movie style by like two kids.
Eaten by the sewer kids.
Yeah.
I will say, I think one part at the end that I found pretty effective is when Clementine is like crawling through the narrow tunnel and she like sees light up ahead, and we keep getting her first person perspective, but it's like out of focus,
right.
And she's crawling, getting closer towards the light, and then as she gets there, she focuses and sees that there's bars over the exit.
It's a cool reveal, but it's one of those where you think that wouldn't have been possible if not for that blurry POV. Otherwise,
right? Well, no,
you could probably see that from like the other end.
Sure, but I mean that's why I thought it was effective,
right? Because
and then they have the shot from outside that pans back as she's like screaming, and the cars on the highway are going by, and then one car passes and she's just gone.
Right,
which I think in and of itself is a cool visual, but knowing that the villains are a bunch of prepubescent kids, once again robs that of a lot of its effectiveness, I think.
Yeah, it's a shame. It seems like they probably thought these murderous children, that was such a cool thing
It's like, oh, they're kids.
Right.
But it's like,
look how fucked up they are.
it's like,
they don't watch SpongeBob.
Oh, now they're just not scary. You know?
Yeah, well, the idea of having like corrupted youth is always kind of a fun trope to play with, like the bad seed kind of thing. But it's a trope that's inherently campy. You can't like do a serious, like realistic movie with a bunch of kids as your villains, you know?
Right. And then the last shot is all of these dirty forest children coming out of the woods and getting onto a bus.
Yeah,
and then we get a real nice text closing saying that the bodies of Lucas and Clementine were found, and then when the killers were apprehended, they were all between the ages of like 8 and 15 or something like that.
A true story. I don't know if you can hear my quotes, but
yeah. Can you hear Eugene's air quotes on true story? It's like the reveal of the villains undermines everything that I liked about it.
Which is crazy. I don't know the last time I felt like that, where the way they finally present the villains just makes everything else
being
fall
so
apart.
ineffective.
Yeah.
I still think that overall it's a pretty solid movie. I think it does its tension well. I disagree with you, Ben, that the pacing is bad. I think the pacing works pretty well for me. The ending undermines so much of the good stuff. I mean, it's still so short. You know, you can still watch it and get decent enjoyment out of it. But
honestly, I think there's like 10 minutes of good stuff in this movie.
Oh, I think there's more than that.
Once it ramps up before it's revealed that it's kids is pretty good. The bad guys never feel imposing, and it's a lot of just running around, or the first half hour is all just build up. It's not even tense build up. It's just build up of the relationship.
Oh, I didn't mind the characterization. I would say that out of this 70-minute movie, I enjoyed the first 45 minutes, and then after that, I can do without. I think that's really where I stand.
Yeah. Well, shall we just jump into ratings then?
Sure. Why don't you start, Eugene?
Well, this was actually one of my favorites from this episode. And I think it's because, even aside from the, hey, I can't knock him for wanting to do that corrupted youth thing, it does make a lot of the other events in the story fall flat. But this just felt more confidently made than the other movies that we watched. And something about the time they put into the relationship and the couple, I enjoyed caring about these people, not just waiting for them to die. It adds a level of involvement that I feel isn't given enough in a lot of movies. Still, it has a lot of flaws, but with the runtime of it and with the things it does do well, I'll give it a 3.5.
I'm also going to give it a 3.5 because I agree with you. I like these two characters. I like the build-up. I think it's tense. Like you said, there's definitely a certain level of confidence behind it. I even think that they're confident with the reveal of the killers and the ending, and I can respect that. It just did not work for me. So I'm also going to give it a 3.5.
Man, I am way on a different wavelength than you guys. I'm gonna give it a 1.5. I think we're being a little too forgiving on this movie because it's in a foreign language. I think if
I don't think that's the case at all.
I think part of it is that I think if this was in English, we would be groaning at a lot more of it.
We have the American version of them.
No, but if it was the same, structure and everything was the same except it was in English, we would be groaning so much more at this movie. The movie is so badly paced. I
totally disagree.
There's no tension between the characters, so it's just like a flaccid relationship between the two where there's no stakes. And when, the home invasion actually begins, it's just a bunch of noises and them running around and nothing really happening. The villains are never really imposing at any point. Then once it actually builds up and starts to pay off in, say, the attic scene, you finally get some action of some sort. it lasts for a solid 10 to 15 minutes of actual tense moments, and then it's revealed that it's all kids, and all of the air is sucked from any tension in the movie. I do give it props for some production design. I think the house is nice looking in a way that's good for the horror of the movie, and I think the sound design is pretty solid. But I think the movie as a whole is kind of just a waste of time for the most part. It's a lot of filler. Maybe it's confidently done, but it's not effectively done. And that's my biggest problem with it. So I'll give it a 1.5. I don't think it's that good.
I think you make fair points. I disagree with a lot of them, but that will give them an average rating of 2.8 pods out of 5.
With that, I am very interested to see how you felt about our next movie.
Yes, so The Strangers is a 2008 film written and directed by Brian Bertino. I don't know what else he's done, if anything.
Yeah, no clue. I just knew him as The Strangers.
It stars Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, or as we affectionately call him, Scooty Speedsticks, or some version of that, as a couple who was supposed to be going on a romantic getaway to the vacation house, but Scooty Speedman has proposed to Liv Tyler, and she said no. So they're both very sad, and then in the middle of the night, they hear a knock on the door and begin to be tormented and preyed upon by 3 masked killers. So it's basically the same premise as The Stranger, or as them, just with adult killers instead of kids. And I will say, I like this movie. I've seen it a few times, and I've always enjoyed it well enough. It's a very by-the-numbers slasher film, but I think that though it's not particularly creative, what it does well.
Well, okay, so let's start off with the relationship between Liv Tyler and Scoot Speedstick. Having tension between the two characters is good. I think it wasn't really effectively done in this movie. I think the whole Liv Tyler is balled up for the half of the movie.
Well, yeah, she does spend most of the movie curled up in the fetal position in various places around the house and yard, which I did think was kind of annoying. But I'm actually much more forgiving of these characters than you guys are. I think they're both competent actors. I would not say that they're great actors.
No, yeah, there's nothing wrong with their performances.
No, I'm just saying that to lead into my thoughts on their relationship. The reason why I think it works it starts on sort of a downer, and that like Scott Speedstick has proposed to her and she says no. But they're not broken up. They're just at like a very low point of their relationship right now, and that they're trying to sort of figure out what next step to take. And Scoot Speedstick has spent all of this time like trying to set up the house as like a romantic getaway with all the rose petals and the champagne and the ice cream and shit. And then he's just kind of like, well, he even says it at one point. He's like, this is really embarrassing. And I think to have the characters start the film on such an emotionally tenuous footing, then once there's an actual real life threat to their life, you know, they have to sort of come back together and work together. And I honestly, I think it is actually a really good setup for the rest of the film. I think it works better for me than if it had just been he had proposed to her and she said yes and they were happy and they were celebrating or something like that.
I actually really agree.
I enjoy the conflict.
I think the conceit is actually really strong and adds a lot of complexity to the characters, especially when shit starts going down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the dialogue with that stuff is kind of clunky, though.
Sure, I can agree with that. It's not the most finessed script. It's rough at times.
I do agree. There is nothing wrong about having them dislike each other or have issues. They don't need to be a happy couple, but we only get one scene before they get to the house, and that's when he proposes to her. And which also
they do that in a flashback.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We only get it in a flashback, and so I don't feel like we were given enough about why they were together in the first place. It felt like they were so disinterested with each other. I never felt like I cared to see them work through their problems because I didn't.
I feel like
disagree.
Since we started
I kind of disagree.
I think
too.
It's unnecessary. I think the reason they're not the most connected when we see them is because of the whole turning down it.
I just didn't care from that point, because if they don't have that care, or we don't even know if they ever had that care. We don't see we don't even hear them describe about how they were ever happy beforehand, so it all just seems really sour.
I mean, in the flashback, which I don't think the flashback needed to be there at all, but we get that little bit of build up. They're at some sort of party or like event or something, because they're dressed at the fucking community center. You know, they seem happy at the beginning of that, when he like takes her outside and he's like carrying her and they're kissing and stuff, and then he proposes to her in the parking lot. I personally could have done without that whole scene. I would have been fine just jumping in. I don't need to know why they had a happy relationship up until this point. I'm content knowing that they were a happy couple, and that the reason Liv Tyler says no to his proposal is just because she's not ready to be married.
I think
she obviously still cares about him, and he still cares about her. It's not like this is the ending of their relationship. It's just a point where they have to start reevaluating things, because she has to consider, why did I say no to getting married? And he has to consider, well, if she loves me, why did she say no?
The flashback really doesn't bother me all that much. I think it adds some context that's somewhat needed. I think by showing it,
I feel otherwise.
You know, it's a little more direct than it would be otherwise. It's okay to leave stuff subtle sometimes, but when you're setting up characters, you want to be direct with it.
I think there's enough other stuff in the opening that gives us that context without having to actually show it to us. Like when he just like puts the ring down on the table in front of her and is like, here, take it. Like, I can't keep it. I can't take it back. Like, just keep the ring.
Yeah.
I think that obviously gives you that context.
That flashback, though, it would seem like the relationship's more just on the ropes than it is like a complex relationship where she's just not ready, but they still love each other.
Maybe. You could be right. But I mean, then like right before the threat reveals itself, like they are beginning to have sex. They're seeming to have makeup sex, and then they hear the first knock on the door. I did think that was kind of stupid, but I guess that would provide for me the context that it's a more complex issue. And I think that the flashback over-explains. It does more than I need.
I agree that it kind of hurts the pacing of this movie. I think this movie's a little better paced than them, but it's still it drags in the first half for sure.
A little bit. I don't mind the character setup. I do think they could get into the action a little bit quicker, but I didn't really feel like, all right, enough with this. I was starting to be like, okay, let's move this on a little bit. So yeah, let's get into the scary stuff. So they hear the knock on the door, and Scoot Speedstick tries to turn on the outside, the porch light, and it's not coming on. And there's just a young woman there, obscured in the darkness, who asks if Tamara is home. They tell her she's got the wrong house. She moves on, and they realize that the light bulb on the porch has been unscrewed. So that's the first real indication that something is amiss here, at least aside from the fact that there's a mysterious person knocking on their door at 4 o'clock in the morning. But then things definitely begin to escalate from there. Scott Speedman goes out to buy Liv Tyler cigarettes. She's like, I'm out of cigarettes. And then when he's out buying her cigarettes, she has a cigarette. So
right, just a liar all around. Why are they even together? See, this is where I start to differ on our feelings on the movie, because this I felt was just, as opposed to how you felt with them, I felt like a lot of it was just so boring. And how you mentioned that all it is like people banging things for half an hour, and them, that's kind of how I felt with The Strangers once it started up. Because the only few moments that, and it seems like a lot of people talk about too, that are genuinely creepy or to provide chills, is when the killers are lurking in the background, just quietly observing them.
Yeah, but I think the inclusion of that is more effective of a build-up than just having noises.
Sure. What I actually really like about The Strangers is that it feels very much like a one-sided game of cat and mouse. These antagonists are out to do more than simply kill these people. They want to really torment them.
Right.
They want to scare them. They enjoy this chase, this hunt. That's why we see so many times, like probably one of the better shots in the movie is when Liv Tyler, it's the wide shot of her just standing in the living room, and just silently the male killer just sort of steps out from behind a wall, just stands there looking at her for a second, and then leaves.
And that might be one of my issues too, where in them I felt like they were more active in trying to defend themselves against their attackers. In The Strangers, it feels more like they are just getting played around with.
In The Strangers, it seems like the killers are really getting like some real gratification out of like this whole game, whether it's like a sexual thing or what. Like it could be, killers are often motivated by sexual desires, but like this is something that they really enjoy. They enjoy the observation. They enjoy remaining unseen and making themselves seen when they want to scare them.
I think the buildup of having them toy with their prey builds up them as more imposing.
Yeah, I think so too.
Which I think is the reason why it's so effective.
I think that it loses a lot of tension through that, because at a certain point, knowing that they're so outmatched that anything they even consider is just flawed and going to get them as closer to death at the end, just feels more frustrating than tense to me. And
I disagree. I think you never, at least for me, you never really get the impression that Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman are gonna come out of this alive, or at least undamaged.
Well, I never feel like they try really hard.
I think it's because they're being toyed with so severely that you really see sort of like their mental state unraveling more and more throughout this whole ordeal, because it's sort of just like these people could kill them at any time. Why aren't they just killing them? Like, they're really stretching this out. And I think for these characters to be in that situation, it would be incredibly harrowing. Well, at one point when shit really starts to escalate, they make a very wise and informed decision to just hole up in like a room with a shotgun pointed at the door and be like, we're just gonna fucking sit here until the cops come or something happens. Like, we're not gonna be fucking stupid.
Well, and that's the thing that is effective for me is I agree, Eugene, that the cards are definitely stacked in the killer's favor. I feel like they don't always have all of the cards. I think some cards are given to the couple in, whether it's Scoot Speedstick coming back to the house finally.
Yeah.
That kind of gave like a bit of a hint of an upper hand for a second.
Right, and then again
shotgun.
when he gets the gun and when Glenn Howerton shows up.
Yeah.
Although I do have thoughts on that. So earlier in the movie, we get Scott Speedman calling his friend saying, hey, can you come pick me up in the morning when you get this? I'm giving what's-her-face the car. Like, we're just going to spend some time apart. And then while all this is going down, his friend, played by Glenn Howerton, which I always forget about and is hilarious, he shows up really early. I have a problem with how that is all introduced.
Yeah, I thought that was a really dumb scene.
That kind of just feels like an excuse for them to give Glenn Howerton some screen time
and
because
have some blood and a body.
Right, well, because he shows up and he sees that their car has been destroyed and like the door to the house is open and there's something going on here. And you think that he's going to get killed by the strangers because you even see the masked man with his axe coming up behind Glenn Howerton. But then he goes down the hall and gets shot by Scott Speedman because he thinks he's one of the killers. I think that scene would have been much more effective had they not shown Glenn Howerton showing up. They hadn't shown him walking around. We're just with Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler in the room. You hear somebody coming down the hallway, see a shadow, see someone get shot. They go out to look at him and, oh shit, my friend showed up early. I accidentally killed him.
I think if they would have introduced his character in that flashback, it would have been effective. I think if it was just some random person that they recognize but the audience doesn't, it would have been a little too unclear.
I don't think I necessarily agree with that because I don't think there's really much point to Glenn Howerton's character other than to have him show up. And I mean, I guess that gives, like you're saying, gives them a little bit of hope that maybe he's going to be able to help them or something. So I guess that's why they did it. I didn't have
all that much of a problem with it. I had a problem with how they handled it. Like one of the biggest problems I have with this movie is all of the characters seem way too dismissive of what's going on.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, definitely when Scott Speedman comes back to the house and Liv Tyler's like, my phone's gone, somebody's been in the house, like they keep knocking on the door, like some shit is going on. And then Scott Speedman's like, what are you talking about? Like he's just totally dismissive of her.
Yeah.
And that is, I agree, is very frustrating.
Well, and Glenn Howerton kind of dismisses everything too. Like,
well, yeah, he doesn't seem all that concerned when he's coming into this house, even though there's blood on the floor and
he sees the destroyed
broken.
Car.
Yeah, he sees their
his
car
windshield
totally
gets destroyed.
Yeah, somebody throws a fucking brick at his windshield and he doesn't, like, he grabs a fire poker when he walks in, but other than that, he seems like mildly puzzled. He doesn't seem all that concerned.
Yeah.
So I will agree with you on that one. Like the sort of dismissive nature of everybody is a little bit frustrating.
I think the dismissiveness kind of sucks a little of the tension out of it.
What I will say is I do enjoy the scene when Scott Speedman goes out to get his phone out of the car before he's accepted that something is going on, and his car is just like totally smashed. And the weird thing about that is like you'd think they would have heard from inside the house somebody like breaking all the windows and like smashing the car. But then when he's like looking through the car to try to find his phone, and you just see somebody's hand like behind him and just like gently like touch the back of his neck and then they run off. I thought that was really good. And I like that they included the sound of somebody's footsteps actually running off. So it's not just like the killer just teleported away.
Yeah, that was like the one good element of sound design.
Oh god, the mixing in this movie is terrible.
Yeah, it's
holy
really
shit.
Bad.
Holy shit.
Half the time you can't even hear what Liv Tyler is saying because she's whispering her lines.
Oh yeah, when he's out at the car and she's like, what is that character's name? James. She's like, James. from like inside the house, and he somehow hears her. It's like, how the fuck did he hear her? But then then the music is always super loud. All like the loud sounds are way too fucking loud. So we were just playing that game of turning it up when there's dialogue and then turning it down when there's action, which I fucking hate. Just mix your movie well. Just mix the sound well.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
It's pretty obvious why they did it, and just loud noises scare people. So
yeah, honestly, but it's not in a scary way. It's just in a frustrating way. Like, ow, this hurts my ears.
I just had no investment in this film, from the characters to the actual attackers themselves. And I think a lot of that just comes from the actions that they do, like Scooty deciding to leave Liv Tyler behind when he goes to try and fight them, but not thinking that they could also just be in the house, and also just splitting up. Why? Just so the one weapon they could use to defend themselves is only in the hands of one person.
Right. I mean, when they shot Glenn Howerton, they should have just gone back in their room with the shotgun.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's also like why after Glenn Howerton sees that the car's all messed up and he walks in the house, if he had just said something, that would have been it. That's why he had to be silent, because if he had said something, Scooty would have been like, oh, there is my friend who is not a murderer.
I mean, I guess he said hello like once or twice.
No, he said hello right as he got shot. He didn't say anything when he was in the actual house.
Well, not when he was in the house. When he was walking up to the house, he calls their names. Yeah, but there's also the music on really loud. But I mean, yeah, I agree.
Doesn't say anything.
If he was just walking around the house going, hey guys, it's me, your buddy Dennis.
Right. Hey, it looks like something's wrong.
Like, are you guys okay? Like, are you guys all right? What's going on here? Yeah, then they would have avoided all of that.
And so I feel like, more so than them, that this film was built around the conveniences of the stupid choices that the characters ended up making. Like, there's good filmmaking going on in here. I don't think that it's a cause that this was done incompetently. It's just that it relies on the cliches that we've seen in a lot of other movies.
Which is my problem with a lot of horror movies, is that, like, if you're making a horror movie, you kind of have to make your main characters make stupid decisions to put themselves in dangerous situations. And sometimes it feels insulting how stupid people can be,
or just forced so that they could stream
this is one of those movies where there are times like that, like, why are you being so dumb?
Right.
Oh, so the filmmaker can give us a scary moment.
It's like the forced tension effect.
It's like my feeling at the end of Black Christmas. Just don't go back in the house.
Yeah.
just those moments.
I think it's much more forgivable in Black Christmas than it is in
because at least
of this.
I mean, shit, that might have set up the cliche because it's so powerfully done.
Yeah. I will say that one of my larger problems with this movie is, I think the design of the killers kind of takes away some of the effectiveness, because it otherwise seems to be, much like them, pretty grounded in reality. And what I at least appreciate about them is, until you see that they're kids, they just appear to be dressed normally with like hooded jackets to obscure their faces and stuff. But then these killers, they have to wear scary doll masks. Well, the women do, and then the guy wears a fucking burlap sack with a smiley face on it.
And just when you finally see their whole getup, they look like fucking Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros or something.
Yeah, they look like an indie rock band, right? Or like a punk rock band, you know.
I forgave that stuff a little bit. The opening sequence with the narration,
oh man, we didn't even talk about that.
Is bad.
Yes.
It's bad, but the one plus I'll give it is it kind of sets the movie up to be schlockier than realistic.
But it doesn't.
But then
really
it's not really
schlocky.
that schlocky, though.
Well, I would agree that it doesn't get schlocky in the first half. The reason it's not effective is it's this like 70s style like narration about how this is
deep scary voice.
tons of people get abducted every year.
Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler were murdered, and they found their bodies, but they don't know who did it.
Yeah, and then they show a true story. They show like the crime scene after that right at the beginning of the movie, which kind of sucks.
They don't show the crime scene too heavily. I don't mind that setup with the little boys coming in and then calling the police, and because they don't reveal too much, they just show some broken shit and that there's blood all over the house. My biggest problem is that they show it basically the same again at the end.
Yeah.
If they had just picked one, I think it would have been better if they just left it off the end. But
I agree.
If they had just opened it with that, it would have been fine. But then it's like they do the same thing again at the end. It's like, well, we remember this. Do you not trust your audience to remember how you started your movie?
The voiceover narration kind of gives it a schlockier vibe, which meshes with the killer's masks, but not with the realism of the first half of the movie,
right?
Or the attempted realism.
But even the second half, and when we finally get to when they're getting killed by the strangers, that's just all such like, it's so bleak, and it's just.
It is very bleak.
All straight, so I don't feel like it lightens up at all, or it gets schlocky.
Well, no, that's the thing. Like, it does sort of set a schlocky tone at the very beginning that it never even really touches, I would say. I like the scene at the end where they're killed. It is very bleak, but I think it's effectively bleak.
It's like one of the only times that Liv Tyler's actually acting in the movie. So
yeah,
I will give it props for that.
When they've been captured and tied up, and I also like that at that point it's full daylight.
Yes,
I enjoyed that as well, that it wasn't also just dark.
Right. You get a better sense of just the timeline of things.
And the killers take off their masks, although we still never see their faces, and then they just take turns stabbing Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler to death. Like, I think that's a
stab pass.
Yeah, stab pass. I think that scene is quite visceral and pretty effectively creepy.
Yeah, because they're doing it pretty slow, like
right. Well, it continues on with the theme that like this is something that they're kind of getting off
right,
on,
and
they're savoring the whole experience.
They provide their thesis statement when Liv Tyler asks, "Why are you doing this to us?" and they reply with, "'Cause you were home, you drew poorly."
Right, which I think I enjoy that these killers are motivated only by their own sadism, and that this is just something that they enjoy doing. But it's because of that I think the masks are kind of corny. What's so scary about the killers is that they're just like normal people who just really enjoy toying with and killing others. The masks just feels like overly edgy. I think it would have been scarier had they really just truly been average people,
right.
you know?
And it's silly to think like them removing the masks, like we don't see their faces, but it's like that doesn't really matter. We don't know who these people are. If we saw their faces, we'd still go, "Oh, okay, they're people."
Maybe they feel like it would humanize them too much. I'm okay with not seeing their faces, but the masks
it's just like
seem like overkill, and the fact that they remove their masks before they kill them, I actually like that, because not only are they showing to their victims that they're just normal people, but it's also like, once you see the killer's face, you know you're gonna die, because they're sure as shit not gonna let you go when you know what they look like.
Yeah,
which actually makes me raise questions now. As we learned from the beginning, these two little boys who actually run into the killers, I guess they're just like Bible thumpers.
They're like Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, I actually really like the scene where the kids are biking and the truck of the killers is.
And they're not even biking; they're just walking, which also makes me think like, how far away were Liv Tyler and Scooty from actual houses? Actually, if these kids who weren't even actually biking, they're just walking with their bikes.
I mean, I get the impression that it's just like, it's not totally the middle of nowhere. It's just like,
like
a more
small town.
It's just like a more rural area where, you know, you have, you know, maybe a mile or so between you and your nearest neighbor, where it's like there are people close by but not close enough to be of any help, you
to
know?
not hear any
to not hear anything. Like that's the impression I get.
But they find Scooty and Liv on the floor, and one of the kids goes to touch Liv Tyler's boob or something.
I don't know.
And then she grabs his arm and screams very loudly.
Jump scare.
Yeah, for the audience.
I hated that.
Yeah,
Which now makes me think, like,
hated that.
she saw their faces. They should go to jail, but
I mean, that's assuming that she didn't still die.
Yeah, no,
I think that ending is really dumb. It should have ended with
that would be even stupider if she screamed and then she died.
The killer
so
getting one of the pamphlets from the kids and then continuing to drive away. Because I think that would have ended it on such a good note, because one of the killers says to the other killer, it'll be easier next time. Or something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that would have been a great line to end it with.
I honestly think it would have been even better to end it on, because they pull over when they see these kids, and one of the women gets out of the car, and she asks for one of his pamphlets, and the kid asks, "Are you a sinner?" And she says, "Sometimes." I think that would have been a great place to end it. I didn't need to see them getting back in the car and driving away, and it'll be easier next time.
Right,
I think
we can already tell, like
this is obviously something they've done before and that they're going to do again. They're way too good at it for this to just be an isolated...
I think in general, ending it on that scene is so much better than ending it with the kids going back to the house.
For sure. Because we already see they set up the whole movie with the kids coming in. And then when we see those kids at the end walking down the side of the road, it's like, oh, those are the kids who find them. Yeah. They could have not shown them going into the house again. I think that would have been great if
it's just only done so Liv Tyler could scream
that
at the
scare.
I think it would have been great if they had just ended it after the one killer says sometimes and then cut to credits. Right. Like that would have been. I think that would have been a really neat, tidy
bookend
ending.
Yeah,
a nice bookend.
There's one scene I want to talk about that we didn't cover. It's probably my least favorite scene out of any of these three movies.
Okay.
And that was, when Liv Tyler's kind of being emotional and sad, she's listening to Joanna Newsom.
Oh, yeah.
And then Scott Speedman goes to pick up some cigarettes for her. And shit gets a little real, and Liv Tyler's running away and hiding in one of the rooms. And the whole time, the record begins to loop.
Oh, God,
and
that was awful.
The most grating Joanna Newsom loop.
And because they probably thought that was so creepy, like, ooh, it's eerie, but no, it's just so annoying.
I agree that it's grating, but I kind of disagree with you guys in that I think that the gratingness of it kind of adds to the tension of the scene. Maybe in the wrong way, because you really just want it to be over.
It feels cheap. But it feels like they just wanted to play a repetitive noise. So you're like, ooh, this is weird.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a particularly scary loop. And on top of that, it was mixed way too high in the mix.
Yeah, the mixing
to the point where it's just like, come
issue.
on.
And then also she smashes a lamp and cuts her hand for what reason?
Oh yeah, why does she smash the lamp?
Yeah.
That's a great question. One other thing that I'll say that I just remembered that I thought was quite effective is when she's messing with the fire and the flue has been closed or whatever, so it's smoking up the house. And the smoke detector comes off, and she takes it off and knocks it onto the floor. And then when she comes back later, she sees that it's been nicely set on the chair that she was standing on. And I think and that's the moment that she knows that somebody has been in the house with her. And I think that's a really effective moment. And maybe the one other time that Liv Tyler actually acts in the movie is her realization. It's such a subtle little thing, that's what I appreciated about that, is the subtlety, but it's undeniable what it means. Like, she knows she did not put the smoke detector there. She knows somebody else is in the house, and just like her moment of realization, I think, is really great.
Yeah, I really like that part too. Yeah, we should just jump into rating here.
Okay.
You start, Matisse, and then we'll go.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I overall think that this is a pretty good movie. I enjoy it. It's not flawless, of course. It has some issues with dialogue and lack of subtlety at times, and the mixing is terrible. But overall, I think it builds tension well. I enjoy the characters well enough. I like the game of cat and mouse with the killers and the really sort of hopeless feeling that you get, like, how are they going to get out of this? I'm going to give this a solid 4 out of 5. It's not perfect, but the things that it does wrong don't piss me off enough to really turn me off this movie. I know that I like this movie better than both of you guys. I think it's a very solid, if by the numbers, slasher film.
I think this is kind of an interesting movie to review because it has a lot of problems, but I think there are a lot of effective parts of it. I think this movie does a much better job of building tension and having a little more complexity to the characters than them. It does still have a lot of problems. Biggest, obviously, is the sound mixing, kind of obnoxious.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know how they mixed it so badly, because it's something that I always forget about before I watch the movie, but then I always like make a note of while I'm watching it. Is like, why is this mixed so poorly?
Just excessive. And I am one for dynamics. I like having some variance between quiet and loud, but it has to be mixed correctly.
Yes.
That's the thing. I like the dynamic nature of the mixing, but it's not done well. It's done wrong. You can't put the music that loud. You can't have the dialogue just be, half coherent, because half of it is Liv Tyler whispering. And on top of that, the dialogue is kind of clunky, but I think the tension is built pretty well. I'm going to give it a solid 3 out of 5. I think this is a movie worth checking out. It's not perfect by any means. It's pretty by the numbers, but what it does pretty well.
I felt that without an establishment of characters that I had an interest in, it really hurt a lot of the rest of the movie for me. I do think there are a lot of good things within it and a lot of things that they do well. But it is those cheap moments where I feel like things were contrived or set up just for the sake of moving the story ahead or getting the characters to eventually get captured. It fell very flat for me. It's not an awful movie, but I just thought it was boring, and so I'm going to give it a 2.
All right, well, that gives us an average of 3 pods out of 5 for The Strangers. And now we can move on to our final film for the day, The Strangers Pray at Night, also known by its more popular title, Call Me By Your Name. Ben, why don't you tell us about The Strangers Pray at Night?
All right, so The Strangers Pray at Night is a 2018 horror sequel reboot to The Strangers.
I'd say it falls comfortably in the soft reboot category.
Yes, it is directed by the same guy who did 47 Meters Down, the shark movie that came out last year with Mandy Moore.
Yes, his name is Johannes Roberts. Yeah, Johannes Roberts.
Sure, okay. Before we get too far into plot details, this kind of follows the same conceit as the other movies. The big difference is instead of a couple, it's a family of 4.
And it's in a trailer park.
Yes, and it's in a trailer park. This movie starts off with, the classic first kill. The opening is pretty forgettable.
I would say the setup kill in this one is extremely clunky and also totally unnecessary. Yeah. I really feel like this one, much more so than the opening of Them, this one feels tacked on. It could have done without this.
Kids in America is being played outside.
Yeah,
and they wake up
from the stranger's beat up old truck that
Yep.
we see in the first movie and also in this one.
Yep. One of them goes to investigate, and
Well, only one of them wakes up.
Yeah.
The husband is asleep through
yeah.
all of this.
So the wife wakes up and goes to investigate.
Well, we don't see the kill. All we see is the killer standing in the darkness behind her, and then cut back to the bedroom where the husband is asleep, and one of the killers lays down in bed next to him, and we see the mask immediately.
Really, really a clunky opening.
It really, really set a bad precedent for me.
It does a huge disservice to the rest of the movie, I think.
Because I know you guys both liked this movie quite a bit more than I did.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because this opening scene just set such an obnoxious precedent for me that I was like, oh my God.
It feels a little toothless.
What
is
am I
my
getting
problem.
into?
There's no sense of real tension.
Right, that sort of thing that feels like a tacked on first kill sort of situation.
Yeah, it definitely does.
When we were walking into the theater, we were talking about it, and I said, this is going to be just like the first one. It's just going to be so dour, brutal, and it's just not going to be enjoyable. I just came out pleasantly surprised by the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think, whereas the first one may have wanted to try and set up a schlocky tone and then never really realized itself, this one, the title card comes in and kind of looks like a 70s sort of
The Strangers Things.
Yeah, Stranger Things. Yeah.
I just want to go ahead and say that I think I fucking hate the subtitle of this movie. Pray at Night.
Yeah. They should have just called it Strangers too.
They should have.
And also, it's
apparently this was pitched back in 2009, like a year after the first one came out. And I don't know if it just got bogged down in production hell or what, but it took 10 years to get made, and I think that kind of hurts it a little bit too. I'm still, even several days after seeing this, I'm still very on the fence about this movie because I think that there's two ways that you can look at it. You can look at it as a direct sequel, the way they intend it, or the way they advertise it, or you can look at it as a soft reboot without the context of the first Strangers. I think that if I had seen this movie before I saw the original Strangers, I might have liked it more. And the problem is it does the soft reboot thing of retreading almost identical ground of the first movie for a pretty large chunk of the movie. You guys seem to think that it did those same things better than the first one, but for me it just felt too familiar.
Well, let's dig into it a little bit
more.
For sure. We get that 70s title card. Quickly for me, it kind of became obvious that they're gonna wear their influences on their sleeve a little bit more. At least they have different influences than the original.
Yeah.
This one is much more 70s, 80s, especially like Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter vibes with the opening soundtrack. The main theme of this movie was essentially just a Halloween ripoff. They changed like one note in the whole theme.
Yeah.
To not
and they slow it down.
Yeah. But it's essentially the same tune. Note for note. We go from that opening clunky kill to introducing the family. The mother, played by Christina Hendricks. The father, I can't remember who he's played by.
Martin Henderson.
He's been in other big movies.
I didn't recognize him, but
they're two kids. The son, who's kind of a more athletic one that's kind of liked by his parents, and the black sheep of the family, this teenage girl, kind of a wannabe punk, I guess you could say.
Yeah, she's wearing a fucking Ramones t-shirt for the entire movie.
Yeah.
And that's something that stood out to me immediately as kind of awkward. I mean, I don't know, maybe high schoolers still wear Ramones t-shirts, but that feels like something that was written by somebody in like their 40s and like, oh, we need to have this alternative, like troubled punk teenager, so let's put her in a Ramones shirt because, yeah, the Ramones are alternative and punk, but they were like 30 fucking years ago. I feel like
Teenage rebellion, am I right, fellow kids?
That's exactly what it felt like to me.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help that she wasn't a great actress in terms of dialogue.
She did not start out good. By the end, I was impressed, I should say. I mean, granted, I was starting from a pretty low bar, but as an actress, she kind of won me over by the end of the movie. Yeah. She starts off just very generic and mopey and obnoxious because they're taking her to an alternative school.
Yeah, so the conceit is she has done something bad with her friends. It never really gets directly explained what, but her parents are like, this is the last straw. We're going to send you to an alternative school. But she's really mad about it because she has to move away from all her friends.
Yeah.
So the beginning of the movie, they're getting ready to go visit their cousin.
Christina Hendricks' aunt and uncle,
yeah.
who own this trailer park that I guess is unoccupied after Labor Day or so.
Yeah, because people timeshare trailers, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It's close to where they're taking her to the school, so they're going to stay in one of the trailers overnight. So that's the main set piece for this whole thing, is this empty trailer park.
I wasn't all too bothered by that. I think we mentioned earlier that this movie took about 10 years to develop all the way. And the original conceit was it was post-recession and the family had to move to the trailer park because of...
Right, the strangers, grapes of wrath.
I like that idea quite a bit more. I still think they could have set it during the same time, even if it still came out in 2018. Because a big problem that I had is, like, this is supposed to take place in the present, so it's 10 years after the first movie. Like, in the original Strangers, like, Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman have, like, flip phones, but in this one, like, everybody's got iPhones and shit. And it takes place 10 years afterwards, but the killers are still wearing the exact same clothes, and they seem to have not aged at all.
I felt like it didn't date itself too directly.
Well, hey, there could be a case made that it doesn't take place in the modern day, because we see smartphones, but smartphones were, they were introduced in like 2000.
They had smartphones.
I think even 2007, I feel. Like, that's when the first iPhone
That was like
released.
the end of the
BlackBerry.
Yeah, craze.
Sad days where having a like giant keyboard on your phone was the coolest fucking
weird
thing.
flip phones.
Near the beginning of the movie, the dad is like, "Oh, you teenagers are always on your phones. Put it down so we can play fucking cards together."
Oh yeah.
And among all the Smash phones, I did see a flip phone. So maybe maybe the dad's a dinosaur, or that we don't know it, but this actually takes place just a couple years after, and that the Edward Sharp gang are not actually all just a bunch of midlife crisis people now.
I guess there's
murder like I used to.
I guess it doesn't date itself too harshly.
But
there's enough
weird.
of a suspension of disbelief, but I think if they want us to assume that it doesn't take place in present day, they should do something to date it more definitively.
Right. No, because most likely it's meant to take place in the modern day, and this is weird.
Well, I like that they don't necessarily bring the date to the forefront. I think that's a very minor element of it.
Oh, yeah, no, we're nitpicking here. I think there's much larger fish to be fried.
Yeah, well, okay, let's talk about the central conflict with the family. I think that was done pretty well. I think a lot of it was carried by Christina Hendricks. I think she gave a really good performance.
Until she's the first one killed.
Well, yes, because she's the most expensive to be in this movie.
Right,
so.
Of course. They didn't want to pay her too heavily. Apparently, the teenage son, Luke, that actor is Lewis Pullman, and he's Bill Pullman's son.
Oh.
Yeah, fun fact.
Yeah, not a great actor in this movie.
No, but once again, just like with the daughter, by the end, he had won me over a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing. I think they weren't good actors in terms of dialogue delivery, but in terms of physicality,
and they were good at being scared.
Yeah, physicality and screams, A+.
Yeah, sure.
We get kind of this good back and forth, and I like how they try to set up a conflict within the family. I think the taking the phones is kind of forced. Because you don't want them to have phones.
Because then it gives an excuse for, why don't you just call the police? Well, Dad took our phones so we could have family time.
Yeah.
Like you said, at a certain point, we see all the phones smashed and destroyed to prove that the strangers have been into the trailer and have broken their phones, which is something that happened in the first one.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the many things that I just felt like this movie took note for note from the original, which is my greatest frustration.
I didn't really have that much of a problem with it. They do a lot of the same things, but the thing I respect about that is tonally the movie is different.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it too, that even if they were hitting some of the same points, the execution of it was done in a different way. It was trying to give a different mood.
It's like pizza. If you get a sausage and pepperoni slice of New York style pizza, it's good. But if you get like a Chicago deep dish sausage and pepperoni pizza,
I like this analogy.
It's still the same. Still the same pizza, but it's done in a different way, and that's what sold it for me.
I suppose.
I think because the first film was just like such a downer. I wasn't enjoying my viewing experience as much as I did with this, even knowing like, yeah, there's a lot of dumb stuff in this movie. It's certainly it's not a good movie, is what we're not saying it is. It is a fun movie, and that's something.
I actually disagree. I think it's effective, not in trying to be seriously scary, but being entertaining and well-paced.
It suffers from like dumb character choices. In some cases, the teleporting villain, and so.
And that's way more hyped up in this one, and also that no matter where these people are hiding, the killers always know exactly where they are.
Right.
Which is something that got a little bit more on my nerves, I guess, in this one.
Well, there's that part where the brother like hides his sister like under this house,
under the porch.
Like, yeah, and he's just like, stay here, they won't find you. But we assume that they're like watching their every move. It's just one of those like, why would you think that was safe?
The killers are a little bit too omniscient in this for me. I think that bothered me somewhat.
That never really bothered me all that much because I think this movie sets itself up for over-the-top schlock.
If a film is like self-aware enough to say, yeah, we're dumb, but we're trying to have fun, I guess for me it's much easier to forgive some things because it's like, okay, they're just trying to.
And I think one of the things that sells that best for me is the fact that we start getting into the action pretty quickly.
We do. That is true. The build-up is much briefer.
15 or 20 minutes into the movie, the son and daughter see the aunt and uncle's trailer. It's dark and empty.
The door is open. That's what
takes they don't know it's the aunt and uncle's trailer right away, but they go in to look around, see what's going on. All of the power is cut, but they find a booze bottle. The girl goes into the bedroom and finds...
because they hear scratching.
They hear the dog in the other room, yeah.
The dog never shows up again. That's a shame.
No, it just
I would have loved to see the dog.
Tackles.
Right.
They find the aunt and uncle brutally mutilated and murdered, and then it picks up pretty quick from there.
Yeah.
I will say that by the end, and I'm not going to talk about the end yet, but by the end, it does get very schlocky and over the top and quite fun. But I will disagree with you that it sets itself up for that. I did not get that impression at all. The beginning build-up all still felt very serious and dour and much more like the first movie, and that's why I was having such a problem when they keep doing all of these familiar things, like the cell phones. The same killer comes to the door and knocks and asks for Tamara, and the light bulb by the door is unscrewed again. And when they find the aunt and uncle, they look at the window and it has hello written all over it in red, which happens exactly in the first movie in the bedroom where Liv Tyler's hiding. And it's just all of that stuff. I'm like, this is exactly the same as the first one. And so for the majority of the movie while I was sitting there, I'm like, why did they make this movie? It's just the same fucking movie in a different setting with slightly more people to be killed.
They're much more fast and loose with the details in this movie than they were in The Strangers, though. The girl that asked for Tamara comes to the door twice, right? And the first
Just
time,
like she does in the first movie.
time she comes up, it's the same kind of thing where the light bulb's supposed to be off or unscrewed.
Oh yeah, but then when it does the reverse shot to the dad, the light is very clearly on. Those little goofs.
Yeah, and then second time he notices the lights out or whatever. But that stuff still seems a little more silly than it did in The Strangers original.
Because they're not as dismissive of it. They're like,
no.
well, what are you doing
Yeah,
here?
they're
Like,
obviously
this
more
is fucking
creeped out.
weird.
I got a different tone from it from some of the visual stuff that was going on in the beginning. Like, there's a lot more movement in the camera, where in The Strangers, I felt like a lot of things were very flat and static.
It's much more colorful, too.
Yeah, like there's a lot of like stuff, like a lot of cool zooms. Like I love that.
There's a lot more. I did definitely notice in the way that it's shot and edited. It does indeed wear its 70s influences very much on its sleeve.
You got some heavy Brian De Palma zooms in there.
Yeah, there were quite a few times where even though I was frustrated with the movie at this point, I was still like, you know, this camera work is good. Before they get to the trailer park, when they're standing outside, when Christina Hendricks goes out to talk to the girl who's standing outside smoking a cigarette, and it starts in a really wide shot, and their entire conversation is just that one shot, and it's just slowly zooming in until by the end of it, it's right on their faces. I noticed that shot, and I was like, this is good. I like this. Even though I didn't care too much about the conversation that was being had, I was like, there were definitely a lot of moments where I appreciated the way it was shot and edited. Or I'm like, this is very 70s influence, which I appreciate in horror movies.
Right. And from this point on, we get the cat and mouse trying to escape the attackers as they keep finding new ways to fuck with them. I think we were all in agreement about the last third of this movie.
Yeah, just for sure.
Fully embracing something so ridiculous.
The schlock. And that's when it actually gets really good. And that's the surprising thing, is like the last 30 minutes of this movie is easily the most fun I had watching any of these three movies. But it's all of the buildup for me that I just considered so ineffectual. Like, obviously there has to be an escalation, but I wish they had done more to, at least for me, really set up a campier tone that they really embrace wholeheartedly by the end, which is fine, but it still feels tonally inconsistent to me because it feels much more dour, like the first Strangers, up through the second act, and then the third act it descends into total schlock.
And that's odd because I'm not sure at what point the movie won me over, but it might have been just from that title card. Looking at that, I'm like, that's weird as hell. That's in such opposition to the awful droning narration in the first movie. And so just like bit by bit, I guess I was getting the movie more and more.
I started to get it at times, but it still felt so... At times it felt really out of the blue, and then by the end, looking back on certain details, I saw the foreshadowing. For some reason, in this movie, they make a point of showing that the killers, or at least the man in the mask, has a predilection for like 80s like synth pop jams and power ballads,
like 80s cornball music.
Yeah, and it felt so fucking weird to me.
I loved it.
Well, that's the thing. It felt weird to me until it got to the swimming pool scene later, which we'll talk about. And at that point, then it totally won me over. But it wasn't doing enough of that kind of campy stuff in the beginning that the few times it happened, it felt like tonally jarring to me. And I was like, what the fuck is this? In hindsight, I actually like this scene more than I did when I was watching it in the theater. When the dad and the son get into the car after Christina Hendricks has been killed and they're driving around the trailer park trying to find the daughter, something hits their windshield and the dad like swerves off and slams into one of the trailers and a big piece of lumber goes through the windshield and like pins him, and he sends the son off with the gun to find the daughter. And then the male killer gets into the car and the first thing he does is turn on the radio and flip through the stations until he gets to like the 80s jams.
Right. Well, in the late 2000s, Joanna Newsom, that kind of music was the real shit for these strangers. But now we're in a different.
Well, that was Liv Tyler
that's
putting
the thing
on music.
But then they play other songs.
They play like an older like 50s 60s like bluegrass.
Yeah, right. Just like that folkiness.
For some reason, before I went into this movie, I thought it was a prequel. I don't know why.
I don't know why either.
Well, because you're like, there's no way they're going to just be like killers from 10 years ago. Yeah. Like that's that.
I think the build-up actually was pretty effective for me because you don't want it to go all the way to the end of the spectrum on camp right away.
Oh, for sure not. But I think you can still build that up better.
But I think tone. It was built up with how bloody it was. You get that right off the bat when Christina Hendricks is killed.
Well, yeah, you have many more people who can comfortably be killed throughout
right.
the movie rather than just the two people or the first one, It's
one of the conceits of using a family instead of
True, absolutely.
Which I think did it a good service because it adds a little more complexity and you get some more...
You get more character dynamics and stuff like that. Like, I don't have a problem with the family. Like, I just felt so much like it was retreading too much common ground. And I'm not saying that I would have wanted them to go really off the spectrum early on like they did at the end, but I think they still could have tonally...
What do you think specifically they did besides, the Tamara stuff that they retreaded on specifically, though? I don't think they really retreaded on all that much.
Well, you've got the phones. You have
the phone has to happen.
Well,
that's
sure, but they did it.
Movie.
Right, but they did it basically in the same way. I mean, they're in a trailer park in the middle of nowhere. It would have been just as easy for them to play on the conceit of not having cell reception. Yeah, they could have just as easily done that.
That's just as easy a lazy trope.
But I mean, the point is that the phones being knocked out is not the problem. It's that they did it in the exact same way as they did in the first one. Well, no, because in The
Strangers, her phone was thrown in the fire.
It was still destroyed. They came into the house and destroyed the phone. Okay, so there's the phones. There's the girl coming to the door twice to ask for Tamara, just like in the first one. There's them unscrewing the porch light, which they did in the first one.
That's the same as
There's
the camera
the
thing.
writing hello on the inside or on the outside of the window in red, which in this movie particularly I think doesn't make sense because both of those characters were killed before they would have had a chance to see that on the window.
Well, it wasn't meant for them, I don't think.
You don't think so?
I think it was meant for the family.
You think it was meant
to find because later in the movie they show like in that trailer the answering machine with the call that Christina Hendricks sent and didn't receive. So my assumption was the killers set up the whole thing, and that's why in the gas station convenience store thing there was a note that said, we left the keys here, and then there was the little
smiley face.
Stranger smiley
there
face.
Is no, I got all of that, but it's too many visual gimmicks that they did exactly from the first one that I think if you're looking at it outside of the context of the first one would not be as problematic. It just felt lazy to me because they have a whole new location. They have all new people. There's a lot of new things they can do. And it's still so much of, oh yeah, I remember that from The Strangers.
See, I
remember that
though.
from
I
The
disagree
Strangers.
because it's things that the killers could easily do every time they kill someone. The toying around
like
with
it's
the killers.
it's their MO.
Yeah, it's their kind of MO.
I just feel like
the door thing is obviously an MO. That's an easy one. I feel like that's one that kind of has to happen in the movie. They have to have an introduction like that.
Sure, but there's things about it that they could have changed enough that it's obviously still an MO and it's not just the exact same thing. They could have asked for a different person even. I think that would have frustrated me less. It's that they're once again asking for Tamara.
I think that's just an MO thing though.
It just
I never had a problem with that. I don't think it really retreads that heavily. I don't think it goes that note for note is the thing. I think it's much more energetic.
There's so
than the
and
Strangers.
there's so much.
I think.
Well, yeah, it is that.
I think when the girl comes in pretty soon after the killer girl to kill Christina Hendricks.
Right.
And they're running her way to the bathroom. I thought that scene was kind of tense, you know? I thought them escaping through the window above.
Oh, sure. And Christina Hendricks can't get out, and so she gets stabbed. Like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like the kills, I don't have problems with the kills or anything. That was all okay. But I mean, there's too much stuff that I recognized directly from the first one that it felt from a writing standpoint, it felt lazy. It felt like either it's lazy or it's too much fan service. Another example is with the blonde killer with the knife. Like in the first one, in The Strangers, she has that whole standoff with Liv Tyler where she's like caressing the knife on the countertop and like running it across the tiles and like spinning it and stuff. And then she does that exact same shit in this one too.
Yeah, that did feel a little fan servicey.
There's too much of that for me.
All of the killers kept their same basic weapons, which I didn't have a big problem with.
I don't have a problem with that either. The weapons are fine. Like I said, if you watch this movie without having seen the first one, I think that all of that stuff works fine. It's executed okay. For so much of the time that we were sitting in the theater watching this movie, I felt like I'm watching the same movie. Maybe some of the stuff is handled more effectively, but it's like this is the same thing. Like what is really truly differentiating Pray at Night from the first Strangers?
Well, I think a lot of
aside from the location and the family, but then
the whole action of the movie is different, though. I mean, the cat and mouse chase is the same, but that's kind of what the movie has to be.
Yeah, that stuff is fine. It's just too much of the same, and I think that at least for the first 2/3, this is not applying to the last third at all, but for the first 2/3, I feel like they missed out on opportunities to really make this movie more of a unique experience from the first one.
They do so many times, though. For example, there's the scene where the brother and the sister finally get away, and it's after she gets stabbed.
Yeah, she gets stabbed and she gets her arm cut up.
Yeah, and he's tending to her wounds, and they're talking about memories or something, and it feels like a lull in the action and a quiet point. And out of nowhere, the killer's truck just plows through the middle of the trailer.
I did like that scene a lot.
And I thought that was a super effective, surprise.
That was a turning point for me. That was the first time in the movie where I really felt like it was something fresh and different. And it was so ridiculous that the killers would know exactly where they are. And then instead of coming in to kill them, they just smash the truck into the trailer. Yeah. I laughed out loud. I liked that. And it was from that point that the movie started to take a dramatic turn upward. But that was, 50 or so minutes into the movie, where I had been underwhelmed by almost everything that came up before it. So that was a turning point, and from there it dramatically rises in quality.
I do think there is a slight lull, in 10 or 15 minutes in the middle before we get to that point when they get back to the aunt and uncle's place and they get the gun, and the brother points the gun at one of the killers. Oh no, that's right before the truck scene when the girl goes into the bedroom, and that's one of those really stupid horror movie moments where they're making really dumb decisions, where she hears the Jack in the Box going, and she gets down in front of it, looks at it real close. What is this? And it pops up, and then the blonde killer comes up from under a blanket behind it, and that's when she stabs her and shit. And that's one of those moments where if I were in that girl's position and I walked into that room and I saw a Jack in the Box mysteriously going by itself, I'd be like, okay, I'm leaving immediately. Yeah, that was pretty dumb.
But yeah, then the brother runs in and points the gun at the killer, and she's like, are you gonna shoot me? And then I thought it was really funny that the sister was like, give me the fucking gun, I'll fucking shoot her. Yeah. I'll fucking shoot her. And then the
just too chicken shit to do it.
Yeah, he's just way too chicken shit.
I mean,
because I would rather have that happen than her be shot and somehow mysteriously still be alive.
For sure.
There's not an issue, with knowing that the kid couldn't pull the trigger. I mean, it's not like they've set him up for anything like that before. But then he also stabs the shit out of one of them, once things.
Later on.
But that sequence is one of the dumber moments in it, and that's kind of a lull for me. That and the scene where the sister is running from the truck.
Oh yeah.
And she goes to hide in this
giant pipe.
Oh god,
tunnel.
Yeah, the pipe tunnel. And then one of the other killers is just in there with her.
Yeah. Well, she's like, why are they doing this to us? And one of the killer just appears behind her, and she's like,
out of the darkness, she's
we haven't even started yet.
And then when she runs away, they cut back to the killer's mask in the tunnel and do a way too long, dramatic zoom in. I thought that was really obnoxious.
That was really dumb.
That was really stupid.
Besides those two scenes, though, I think most of it was pretty inventive. When they crash, the dad
into
son.
One of the trailers.
I thought the toying around with the radio was kind of fun.
That was kind of fun. Yeah.
I was a little nervous when that scene was going on because he pulled out the stabby thing, the
it was
shiv.
like an ice pick.
Yeah,
it looked like.
And I was worried that this movie would just be a bunch of different people getting stabbed.
Basically, but
it gets more inventive.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Well, should we start getting into when it gets really, really, really fun?
Yeah.
So
the daughter is still hiding somewhere. Is that when he puts her in the under the porch?
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm gonna go to the office and see if I can find a phone or something to call for help.
And so he goes to the office building, and there's some spooky sounds, and suddenly all of the lights turn on in the building. And
before that, we also get all of the strangers just popping up behind him.
Yeah, one of them is in the office, and then the other one is outside and banging on the window.
Did you guys notice? Because there are three of them. There's the dude, the blonde-haired girl, and then the brunette. The brunette didn't show up a lot in this.
She doesn't show up a lot in either of them, honestly. I was thinking the same thing.
And wasn't she the one that took the pamphlet?
No, that was the blonde one. Yeah, okay. She and the man are the main ones, and then the shorter brunette one in both movies feels like kind of an afterthought. Right. It's kind of just there's a third one, so that's shitty, I guess. So there's three of them instead of two. She feels like an afterthought. And I mean, in this one, she's fodder basically.
Yeah,
for that next scene when he runs to the swimming pool, and then all the lights come on and it's all neon, and they start blasting Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Yeah,
which
is
amazing.
Prime 80s cheese.
That's so good. And then he's just the son is just standing there, and he's got, what does he have? It's
like a bat or something.
A bat or a fire poker or something, like something long and hard. And
and then the brunette,
she just starts sprinting from behind.
Like she's gonna football tackle him.
And I was like, oh God, like, she's like, see her coming, please. Like, don't let her just run up and stab him. But instead, he turns around and whacks the shit out of her.
It was so satisfying.
It was so satisfying. And then she like wakes up and starts like trying to fight him, and then he just stabs the shit out of her.
And then the male stranger comes over, and he's just like, he's like, I killed one of yours. How does that feel?
I killed one of yours.
To like an alien or something. Like,
and then that leads to, or I guess is part of my favorite scene in the movie is when they start fighting and end up in the pool.
Yeah.
And
so the main guy has an axe. And it's like an axe versus like a fire poker thing. And they're fighting, and then eventually they kind of fall into the pool.
And just this whole time, Total Eclipse of the Heart is just blaring. And we get these nice cuts where they go underwater and the music is like muffled and they're struggling, and then it'll be outside. Like that whole scene is put together and handled so effectively, and it's just total schlock and so much fucking fun.
Honestly, it's one of the best horror scenes in any movie I've seen in the past few years. I think it's one of the most well done in terms of
it's
style.
Like not scary, but it's fun. Yeah, it's like just...
Well, yeah, and it also is like, you don't at that point just feel like the killers are like supernaturally strong or powerful or anything, because like it's a really like two-sided struggle between the kid and the killer. You don't just feel like the kid is totally outmatched, you know. It really comes down to these people are so good at killing because they have the element of surprise and they psychologically torment their victims. But then when it comes down to a square off fight, you know, they are just people.
Right.
And like I was saying before when we were talking about the strangers, while the deck is stacked in the strangers, I think the deck is less stacked in this movie, and I feel like that's one of its strong suit is because it's more of a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's
I like
as
that.
one-sided.
They're not as passive. Like they're actively trying to do things to not just survive, but to get back at them. It's just a shame that as this fight's going on, then the kid makes the really dumb decision to like start just like walking out of the water.
Yeah, to try to escape.
Which just lets the male stranger just walk up behind him
and just like brutally stab him.
Right, which is great because it's still in the water, and so then it starts to seep out into the pool.
You have this beautiful shot of him just slowly losing blood in the pool while the end of Total Eclipse of the Heart is playing.
Yeah.
And you even get some shots where it's going back and forth
and really
in the water
extended
and
shot.
out
It's like a good minute of just him bobbing up and down.
Yeah, and I mean, you expect him to just go under and drown at any moment, and then out of nowhere, the sister shows up and drags him out of the water and manages to hide him somewhere, which I thought was a little bit
like puts him in a
she puts him in like a shed. Like she doesn't try to like stop the bleeding or anything or bandage the wound. She's just like, you stay here, I'm gonna go get help. And I'm just thinking he will be dead in like 30 seconds though. Like he was not.
I feel like I easily suspended my disbelief after that pool scene though.
That's like we were saying,
it's just like one of those dumb characters.
That's the point where it really descends into schlockier territory, but really well done, fun schlock. because after that, the daughter is she runs out into the street and she falls down, and there's a car pulls up and the headlights are blaring, and you think that it's the killer in his truck, and then it's a cop. A cop has shown up. I don't did somebody? Oh yeah, somebody did manage to make a call at one point.
She managed.
One of the phones is kind of working. And so she sort of makes a call. So I guess there's somebody.
I thought that was kind of a cool subversion of just having the phones be destroyed too. Like they actually use the phones.
Yeah, at least one of them kind of works.
That's inventive enough. It's a subversion of the trope.
And just smashing the screen doesn't break it completely.
At least there was the phone was damaged because the call didn't it cut off. But at least there's payoff later when the cop shows up. But then they did the thing that they do in so many horror movies where a cop shows up and just gets killed immediately.
He's trying to calm her down,
she's
and the whole time
there's people trying to kill us, and the whole time you see the blonde killer walking up behind him just slowly, and the daughter almost she's within the daughter's line of sight, and she should just be like, yo, turn around, watch out, but she just walks up and slits the cop's throat. But then after that I thought was kind of dumb, but then after that I really like the scene where the daughter gets into the cop's car and she's trying to find the keys, and the killer comes up and knocks on the window and dangles the keys in front of her face, look what I got. She opens the door and starts slashing her and stabbing her, and the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, go for the shotgun, it's a cop car, there's a shotgun, go for the shotgun.
And the shotgun is sitting in the middle of the car.
Yeah, well, it's on the rack they have it in most cop cars, and she keeps trying to pull it off, but it's locked or something, and she finally gets it off and just shoots the shit out of the killer. And
it's super satisfying.
It is extremely satisfying. I'm torn on whether I think we should have seen the killer's face at this point, because she takes the mask off.
It's there isn't a reason to.
I
it's
actually really like it because it's a subversion of the first movie where we get the killers taking off their masks, but we don't see them. But the point of them taking off their mask is oh, you're fucked anyways. You're gonna die anyways.
Well,
it kind of reverses that in that the mask is taken off, but it's the killers that are going to die because of it.
Right. And that in itself doesn't bother me. What kind of puts me on the fence about it, though, is that this killer is when she takes the mask off, she looks like she's 23 years old.
Right.
And I mean, it's all the killers are played by different actors in this one than they are in the first one. And they can get away with that because their faces aren't ever shown in the first one. But I did notice in this one that when the girl comes to the door and asks if Tamara's home, her voice is noticeably higher pitched than in the first one. In the first Strangers, they all seem a little bit older, not old, but in their 30s or so, at least from the way their voices sound. But then in this one, the blonde killer is a young girl. And that's another one of those things where if this is supposed to take place 10 years after the first one, the age difference is wildly unbelievable.
Right. I agree with you on that.
It's not it's not a big deal. It didn't bother me too much, but it was the kind of thing that I noticed enough that it gave me pause a little bit. But then she asks her why are you doing this to us? And I was like, don't say because you were home. Don't say because you were home. Don't say because you were home. And then she says, 'cause why not? And I was like, oh, okay, all right, fine. Yeah. Finally, they had an opportunity to do something exactly like they did in the first one, and they went with something else. And so that was satisfying for me.
They subvert a lot of the first one.
That was
a good way.
That moment was satisfying for me, and then she just gets shot again.
Yeah.
And then, man, we have this fantastic final confrontation with the last living killer. She gets in the cop car, and she's trying to drive off, and he comes from the cut and smashes into her car. And then the cars
keeps turning around and smashing into her.
Yeah, he hits the car from behind and then backs up and drives to the side to try to T-bone her.
Which they did that shit in the first one too, and I was just like, it looks like they got this truck repaired because they keep using this truck as like a battering ram, but it's not just totally destroyed.
The truck gets stuck to the police car, essentially.
Like the grill or something.
Yeah, like the
twisted metal is all caught together.
And because of the damage to the cars, respectively, a bunch of gasoline is leaking out the bottom.
And of course, our protagonist conveniently has a Zippo.
Well, yeah, because we see her smoking.
Right. Well, yeah. No, she's air quotes smoking cigarettes.
Edgy teen.
Yeah, and just a quick segue. It was frustrating me how badly she was smoking cigarettes. Well, and then at one point, her brother is even like, you have to actually inhale, right? Yeah. And I was like, thank you. I'm so glad.
Yeah, I thought that was a really funny touch.
I would guess that actress is probably just not a smoker.
I think it also builds on the character of an edgy teenager.
Yeah,
yeah, sure. Like she wants to fit in by smoking because it's cool, but she doesn't really know what you're supposed to do.
Of course, in true horror fashion, instead of just having like a Bic lighter or something, she has a Zippo, something that can stay lit when she throws it into the gasoline. That's important.
Yeah. That would be funny, having to see her like go up to the puddle with a Bic lighter and just try and light it that way.
Throwing a bunch of matches, hoping they stay lit.
Yeah, so she throws her Zippo into the pool of gas, and both cars explode in glorious fashion. Although I did notice a goof in the wide shot of the cars blowing up. If you weren't looking for it, you might not see it, but I very clearly saw that there was nobody sitting behind the wheel of the killer's truck.
I noticed that too, but after I thought about it a little more, I thought that maybe the killer had gotten out of the truck before that and gotten back in. I
don't think there was any time for that.
No, and yes, that's something we need to explain as well. After the car explodes and the girl starts walking away, the car starts moving again, and the stranger guy, like, he's on fire, but he's still driving.
The whole truck is on fire. Well, what's great is that like she seems to be safe. She's like wandering off down the road, and she comes to a bridge, and she's on the bridge, and she collapses and starts crawling, and then from behind her we see this flaming truck pulling up slowly onto the bridge. I mean,
we see it before then, like as she's walking away. I think it starts to pull
I don't think we see it until she's starting to get onto the bridge. I mean, that's a minor detail. I don't remember. I think
I mean, either way, it's like, hey, if you guys have played the new Resident Evil, there's a boss fight that's almost exactly like that. Guy in flaming cars. So,
but I mean, my point about I don't think there was any time for the killer to actually get out of the truck.
No, and
I think it was just that they just didn't take the time to throw a mannequin with a bag on its head.
Well, it's like when you see a car flying off a cliff in a movie. Most of the time, there isn't actually someone in there because.
There's the famous scene in Goodfellas when Robert De Niro gets into the car and turns it on and it explodes, where if you're watching for it closely, you can see the cut where it goes from Robert De Niro to a dummy painted like Robert De Niro. It's the kind of thing that you have to be looking for to be able to see it.
I've never actually noticed that.
It's actually really funny because the dummy looks kind of stupid. So the next time you're watching Goodfellas, watch for that cut. I mean, that was just a minor little goof that I thought was funny.
She happens upon some random person driving.
Before that, the killer gets out of the flaming truck on the bridge, and we see that he's all burned and
he's not
disfigured, and he has his axe, and he's coming for her, and she's like trying to crawl away on the ground, and then he just collapses. So it's like, oh, well, he almost got her, but not quite. And so then she gets up and walks off again and manages to flag down a car.
When they get out of the car and she's like, please, can you help me? The mom screams and runs back, and I thought it was like, okay, she thinks that this girl's crazy, and
that's what I thought too. And then she turns around and there's the killer with his axe again, and that's why she was screaming.
Like, it's crazy, God, he's still alive. And then
and that's when this whole last real scene is just like massive homage to the OG Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's exactly the same when the girl in Texas Chainsaw runs out and flags down the trucker, and he gets out and he starts coming over to talk to her, and then Leatherface comes up with the chainsaw and he just runs and gets back into the truck. As the truck is driving off, our protagonist runs and jumps into the back of it.
Oh my god, yeah.
Just like in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She's all red lit from the taillights, which is just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the character all covered in blood. And the killer jumps onto the back and a
callback to a conversation she had with her brother about playing baseball.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. He's like, you weren't even strong enough to lift up the baseball bat. And then she finds a bat in the bed of the pickup and just clobbers him in the head, and he goes flying out. And then it's the shot of her, very much like Texas Chainsaw, just like riding down the road in the back of this pickup truck, all bloodied and shit.
Yeah. But that is not the final shot of the film.
It should have been.
It should have been because the next part is so dumb and unnecessary.
Like The Strangers, it has a very unnecessary final sequence.
Right. Yeah. She's in the hospital with her brother, who's hooked up to all, a bunch of machines and
he
stuff.
Survived somehow.
Yeah, right. She hears a knocking on the door, and then, like, the sound of the jack of the box that, she heard before one of the houses, which also that's a dumb, like,
I didn't even pick up on the jack of the box sound.
I totally heard. I mean,
really?
It wasn't like, it's not like the Pop Goes the Weasel thing. It's like, it was another,
I did not pick up on that at all.
Really?
Just because she has a cup of water, and as soon as she hears the knock on the door, she drops the water,
right.
And then it cuts to credits.
Yeah, like that thing, they I'm pretty sure they put that sound there because then otherwise, like, it's just the doctor knocking on the door.
Which I would have liked. I mean, I think the idea that maybe one of the killers survived is really stupid because they were like, it was fun enough to have the main guy like surviving all of this trauma in his like rage to try to kill her.
Right.
But they've all of them were pretty like soundly
killed.
Destroyed.
I really wish that hospital scene was not in the movie at all. I think even if it was a doctor, it would have been sloppy.
Yeah, they should have just ended it with her in the back of the pickup truck. That's just once again.
Which then, you get a happy ending this way, but what's the point of a happy ending with a story like this? We already get enough ending. Well, they're both alive,
right? But then, maybe so is one of the killers.
Yeah, which is
the dumb part.
The guy's gonna come crawling in, his head bashed in. He's like, "Where are you?"
Yeah, and so that ending was dumb. But man, those last like 20-30 minutes are just so enjoyable and so entertaining, and it just makes it all the more frustrating for me that the first 2/3 of the movie didn't land for me like I wanted them to. Because like I said, the final act of this movie is the best part of all three of these movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think that makes the ending more frustrating because I feel like they could have done more original stuff in the beginning to lead up to that nicely in a satisfying way.
I think it would be interesting to see what you think on rewatching it.
I think so too.
Because I think a lot of the minor details are, well, going into this movie, it's a Strangers sequel 10 years later. Strangers wasn't even that good of a movie.
Yeah,
you expect this movie to be bad, and
we were all expecting
and I wonder if that was a hindrance to your viewing somewhat.
I think that could be.
You didn't have the baggage of this being a sequel to a movie 10 years later.
I think if I sit on it for a few months and go back and rewatch just this one and not The Strangers, and I try to look at it in the context of its own standalone film unrelated to The Strangers, then it might be more effective for me. It just felt like too much of a rehashing of a movie from 10 years ago. 10 years is a weird span of time where it's been a really long time since the first one, but not long enough to really be in reboot territory, for me. It feels too much like a direct sequel, and that's what makes all of the repeated stuff kind of feel dumbed down and a bit insulting for me.
I think also, if we had not watched The Strangers so recently...
We did watch it the day before.
Right. Because there are probably a lot of people who are watching this and they're like, man, I haven't seen that movie.
That's what I'm saying. If I come back to it at a later date without The Strangers being so fresh in my mind...
Yeah.
That's the thing, too. 10 years for people who had only seen it 10 years ago.
People have a shorter attention.
Yeah.
The general public has a short attention span.
But, yeah, let's just jump into ratings.
For sure.
I'll go first, I guess. I found this movie to be way better than it had any right to be. I think it was incredibly inventive with what it does. It does retread a lot of territory of the first one, but I think that's more of a service for newcomers to the series. I think I would recommend seeing this one over the original Strangers if you had to pick one.
I might too.
Wow.
I might.
It's like I was saying with that pizza analogy, like it's the same kind of conceit but done in a different style. And it subverts a lot of things that the first one did. For example, with the phone, just having the cards a little more evenly stacked between them. It was a little more even of a cat and mouse chase. And once again, the last half hour of this movie is some of the best horror movie stuff I've seen in years in the theater. Obviously, this movie has some pitfalls. Some of the dialogue is a little clunky. There's a little bit of lull in the middle act. But overall, I think this was a really, really good movie. And once again, I think this year's shaping up to be a really solid year for horror movies. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5.
I won't repeat too much of what I've said. All I'll add is that maybe some of my hang-ups with the retreading of familiar ground with this comes from the fact that I like The Strangers, and I obviously liked it better than both of you guys did. So seeing the same things over again feels unnecessary to me because I already thought that they were done well in the first one and that I wanted to see something fresh. If I liked The Strangers less, then maybe I would be more forgiving of some of that stuff in this movie like you guys were. And this is one of those things that maybe in a future episode, months down the road, I might update my thoughts on it. But at this point in time, in the context of the series, how I just felt about the whole experience in general, I don't feel like I can comfortably give it a higher rating than a 3 out of 5. It does some really fantastic stuff at the end that I really, really enjoyed. But up till that point, it felt too much like I was just rewatching The Strangers, and I was just not interested in a lot of that stuff. So we'll see how this affects me more down the road. But for now, I'll give it a middling 3 out of 5.
This is the second time in the past month where I've watched a sequel to a horror movie expecting it to be bad and then ending up liking it a whole lot more than I ever thought I would. It happened to me just with Creep. I thought it was such a boring movie, the first one. The second one I thought was actually really, really good. And
we'll do an episode on Creep at some point.
I would love to do that. And then with The Strangers, I thought it was so boring. And then with this one, it's better, not in the same way that Creep 2 builds up on its premises. Strangers Prey at Night is better because it's pivoted. It's emotional delivery or just what exactly they're trying to make you feel throughout the movie. And it just had so much more of energy behind it, which I really appreciated. I think that it is a pretty dumb movie, the characters and everything like that, but I'd say that the way that everything was executed just made it a really enjoyable experience for me. So I'm going to give it a 3.5.
All right. Well, that gives The Strangers Prey at Night a average rating of 3.5 pods, which it's funny that on average, this is the best movie out of all of them in terms of our average ratings. But I also think this was a good discussion because, as we were talking about in the car on our way home the other day, each of us likes one of these movies, a different one of these movies, better than the other.
Yeah, and dislikes one as well.
Yeah, right.
And because even though I gave the same rating for Prey at Night and Them, I think they're both good in different ways. I feel like Them is just made better.
Them is that brick fire pizza.
Yeah,
it's made quickly, and it's like a margarita pizza. It's like fancy-ish, but like it's kind of bland. And then the normal Strangers is your like.
It's just like dollar pizza.
Yeah, it's your like dollar pizza. It gets the job done. It's nothing new. And then Prey at Night is that like greasy
movies like pizza. The producer's the sauce.
Greasy slice that's like you're gonna feel gross after, but oh man, is it tasty? Yeah.
Oh man, you caught me again with your.
I would be really, really curious to hear the opinions from somebody who has only seen Prey at Night out of all of them, has not seen any of the others, and I would be curious how it stands up as an entry to the series, because I do think that a lot of my hang-ups come from it in context.
Yeah, so if any of you listening haven't seen the new one or any of them, go see it. They deserve your money to go see it. It's inventive enough that this deserves your money more so than most horror sequels, I would say.
I can agree with that.
So yeah, go see it, and then email us or message us on Facebook or Twitter, and we'd love to see some other perspectives, and we'll even talk about it on air if you do. So
yeah, absolutely. I would be fine doing a brief little update on this movie somewhere down the road.
I feel like it'd be really cool if down the line we do like a redemption episode. We all choose movies that we absolutely hated our first viewing, and then maybe going back and seeing if our
movies. I think changed. Movies that more specifically movies that we're split on. Where
not one we all agree was bad, but something like Mother or
like an indefensive episode almost, where it's movies that are critically panned but we love. And
or one of us loved and the others hated. Yeah, something like this, and because
we certainly
Mother
we clash a good amount on these movies, and it'd be cool to one day revisit and see if we, because like I mentioned with Mother, that's one I really feel like I need to check out again, because it seems there's something that people are getting that I'm not getting from it, and I feel like I need to give it another go.
Yeah, I think that could be fun. Let us know what you think, if that's something that you'd like to hear from us in the future.
If you thought we were wrong about one of your favorite horror movies,
tell us why.
Yes, exactly. Because say why we're stupid.
We actually have a game for the first time in fucking months.
This episode, we're doing a crossover game. So the premise of this game is we have, this horror franchise, The Strangers, and one thing that horror franchises love to do is do crossover movies. So you got your Freddy and Jason. You got
your Alien versus Predator.
Yeah. We'll give you like 10 or 15 minutes, but think of a crossover franchise you could do with The Strangers, and then I'll give you guys like 3 or 4 minutes to pitch me crossover movie between franchises. And I'm going to rate it not based on how good the movie necessarily would be, but how entertaining it would be.
I'm excited about
I'll
this
give brownie points for creativity too, so...
All right.
We're gonna cut for 10-15.
Take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Yeah,
So, how are we determining who goes first, Ben?
I'm gonna play Hollywood executive.
I got a coin.
Oh, you got a coin. Okay, that'll be a little more fair.
I'll call heads.
All right, tails.
Okay. It
Is tails.
tails.
Okay.
So, do you want to go first or defer?
I'll defer to Eugene. I'll let Eugene go first.
Oh boy. All right. Well, let me just hit you off with the story right here, Mr. Producer Man. Johnny is a well-liked man. He has a beautiful girlfriend, and he has just a wonderful group of buddies. Just, his life could not be any better. But then one day, strangers start to come around the house, and Johnny realizes, oh, haha, I need to fight for my life. Oh, no! We will learn the story of why he has a handgun in his house. We will know why he took Danny in under his wing. His parents were tragically murdered by the strangers. And we're gonna discover more about what happened with his relationship and Lisa. And maybe she fucked one of the strangers? You will find this out in the next fucking hit sensation of 2019, The Strangest Room, coming soon to a theater near you.
Would this be a prequel to the room?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be a prequel. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
So it's all about the back, because there's so many questions that don't have answers.
So this film is really going to provide context to the room.
It's going to provide, yes, exactly. It's going to make it. No, man,
I don't understand either.
Same.
My phone thought that this idea was so insane. It just had to tell me I do not understand. Well, hopefully you guys do. This movie isn't being made for the machines. It's being made for good, red-blooded people. So
Interesting.
I'm very intrigued. I would watch the fuck out of that. All right, is it my turn?
yes.
Okay, I went into much more detail. I hope that's okay.
No, that's
totally
better.
fine.
Okay. The next hit horror crossover is Aliens versus the Strangers. This takes place 100 years after the events of Alien Resurrection. The Weyland-Yutani Corporation has created yet another clone of Ripley, but she's old now because I don't want to see them do the de-aging thing on Sigourney Weaver. So it's an old clone. She has been sent to a distant planet to capture the egg of an alien queen to be brought back to the Earth because Weyland-Yutani is the stupidest and most evil corporation in film history.
Man, yeah, all they do is just...
Yeah, that's all they do. So while she is infiltrating this planet and exploring and hiding from the massive hive of xenomorphs, she discovers an ancient life pod from Earth. It seems to have been there for a very, very long time. When she opens it, she discovers the strangers who, in true Jason X fashion, have been put back together and are cyborgs or some bullshit.
Oh, okay. Strangers X.
So they look like the strangers, but they're like futuristic. And when she opens the pod, they are reawakened, and we hear a robotic voice ask, "Is Tamara home?" So then a good chunk of the movie after that is the strangers trying to kill Ripley. But they eventually come into contact with the xenomorphs, and that's when the battle for the ages begins. Because even though the xenomorphs are, terrifying, the strangers are real strong and shit because robots or something. And so then the strangers decide that hunting a mere human, even though it's Ripley, is not challenging enough. So they begin hunting the aliens. And the final battle is the strangers fighting the queen inside of a volcano, because why not? And at the same time, Ripley, who recognizes that the robo-strangers are a much greater threat to the universe than the xenomorphs, has to plant a nuke in the base of in the volcano, which will set off a chain reaction that destroys the entire planet.
Oh my god! I thought you were gonna say team up with the aliens.
No, but at the same time, she's still trying to complete her job. So she's trying to find the alien egg queen so she can take it back to Earth because she wants to get that good Wayland Yutani Christmas bonus.
Oh my god! Okay, so yeah, she's all on board for this.
Yeah, well, because this time with the clone, they
cloned her right.
They cloned her right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But the twist is then before she's able to plant the bomb, David, the android, shows up. And he tries to stop her, revealing that he is in fact the one who created the robo strangers because the perfect organism was not perfect enough, or some megalomaniacal bullshit in that vein.
Of course.
And he created them to really test the strength of the xenomorphs. Ripley is able to plant the bomb and she escapes the planet. Unfortunately, she has to leave the alien egg behind. But in her escape pod, she realizes that one of the strangers has made it on board. And right before he kills her, he takes off his mask and it's fucking David.
Oh my god.
Roll credits.
Wow, these are both wonderfully dumb ideas.
Hey, I'm a serious filmmaker.
Eugene, I have to give you props. We're finally getting the answers we deserve.
The answers.
And
that is the last crossover I expected, which is fantastic.
Matisse, I have to give you props for the absurd amount of detail you went into here.
No, that was great.
I was really on a roll.
Part of me was hoping the reason David created The Strangers is because that was the only DVD on the ship.
I can write that in. That seems good.
But yeah, I gotta give it to Matisse just for the amount of detail.
Oh, I would have to go with
like,
that. Yeah. Mine sounds exciting, but
I would still watch. Ain't yours.
No bread for this butter over here.
All right, so you get to pick the next mini-sode.
Yeah, so why don't you read out a list of some of the ones we have planned, and I will choose which one will be coming out next week.
All right, so I'll give you a handful of options here. We can do Veronica, which is the new Netflix horror from the guy who did Wreck. We could do Poughkeepsie Tapes, which is a fantastic under-the-radar documentary-esque movie. We got Get Out, which is a classic, one of the best horror movies of last year. And then we have It Follows, which is also a classic.
I think that I am going to go with the Poughkeepsie Tapes. I've seen this movie once, and it was one of the most effectively disturbing horror movies that I've ever seen, and I've been wanting to rewatch it and talk about it on the show for a while. So that's what you folks can all expect next week. Our mini pod will be on the Poughkeepsie Tapes, which came out in 2008 or something like that?
Yeah, but it just got a Blu-ray release for the first time in November.
Fan-fucking-tastic. Fan-fucking-tastic. I guess that brings us to the end of this episode. Hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, @PodPeoplePod. This was a contentious episode for us. We all felt pretty differently about all three of these movies.
Yeah, you guys were only listening, but you didn't see the stab wounds that we collected throughout the episode.
We've all collected a few deep wounds, so we're gonna have to go to the hospital after this. But we'd love to hear some of y'all's thoughts on The Strangers, especially Pray at Night. That seems to be the most contentious one between us. So yeah, follow us on social media. If you like the show, which we hope you do, you can give us a brief review and a rating on Apple Podcasts. That would be enormously helpful to help us climb up the charts a little bit and get into some new people's ears, like brainworms.
Nothing like comparing our podcast to brainworms.
Yeah, equally unpleasant. So yeah, take the time to leave us a rating and review. That would be absolutely amazing. The show is produced by Ben and edited by yours truly. And Ben is also the artist behind our theme music, so spooky scary for that. You can follow me personally on Twitter if you're into that kind of bullshit, at Mr. Van Awesome. Do you guys have anything you want to plug?
All I'm going to say is if you're listening, feel free to send an email our way at podpeoplepod@gmail.com with any questions you might have for us, and if it's interesting enough, we'll put it at the end of the show.
Yeah, send us also recommendations for films that you'd like to see us do mini episodes about, or just themes in general that you'd like to hear longer episodes about. We've gotten a couple of recommendations from people that will be coming up in future mini episodes, so we want to get involved with the rest of our listeners. Eugene, do you have anything?
No plugs. Just again, back rubs. I did get in trouble.
No plugs, just back rubs.
I got in trouble with the law a little bit ago. I was trying to give out back rubs in front of the pick and save, and they saw me. Did not like the fact that I put my hands on them because
Wait, you put your hands on the cops?
I tried to give him a back rub, so I snuck up on the cop, and so I got tased. I got thrown in jail. I owe
Were
so
they
much money.
upset because you weren't wearing any pants, or?
I think it was that, and also my hands were like lotiony. They probably thought it was like eels or something on the back.
If there's
of
one
there.
thing I've learned, it's that cops don't like being snuck up on.
Yeah, or eels.
Or eels.
Yeah, nothing to plug right now. Just back rubs.
Well, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. Until next time,
Eat your vegetables.
Eat your vegetables. And hey, if somebody knocks on your door in the middle of the night, maybe just don't answer.